a lot of their agenda, whether it is the need.
Authoritarian government, that's part of it too. Listen, it's.
So, Greg, that's a convenient narrative now. Would have been better off last.
You can be pretty sure that they don't go through all the regulations at it.
In total, there were 17 people kidnapped, 16 of them American.
That it's likely that the climate proposals and the big infrastructure bill
came into prominence under the Reagan administration.
Claiming she violated the Hatch Act by seeming to endorse the Virginia governor's race, also sparking trouble for White House.
Don't know it. We're going in. The way the prisoners got out.
This is the cages inside here.
Was that these would be reviewed and renewed
to make sure that life gets better in this country for people trying to raise children.
Right, but only one of the bills is ready now.
To participate in the.
She's back in Europe while they're supposed to be concerned about the debt ceiling. She's on her farewell tour, and that's why in the reconciliation.
I have tested the hypothesis, and you can get from one point in the building to.
Look, I think the president, of course, wants former Governor McAuliffe to be the future.
It was her speech, flanked by associates on the steps of the Supreme Court, that catapulted gold.
The National Farmers Federation have committed to it. The BCA, you know, the big end of town.
But another part to this is that Chinese companies are very.
We forced the Americans out, he said.
Yeah, Kira, I mean, a giant in our politics and American history, but certainly a complicated.
Do you think we will see a vote on October 31st?
And so he was sort of a uniquely positioned military leader to sort of branch that divide, that
assistance needed to the police with equipment.
We need to act. The president has led on this literally from.
Where and how do they manage to get this stuff so quick?
The youngins that come out of hip hop now are just a reflection of what's happening in their communities, what it is that they're seeing on TV, what it is that they're being inspired by.
Well, John, today is deadline day. The committee is going to have to make some big decisions.
We have a very, very busy summer full of events, large and small.
Melbourne earned the unwanted title of the world's most.
Your brothers and sisters, there are going to be more resources, not fewer.
And during the insurrection at Capitol Hill, why, oh, why?
Is something that everybody will pay attention to. And the first story that will all.
I feel like he has abandoned us. He has no care.
People can travel as far as they like across metropolitan.
We know that, he may have been on other treatments. We also don't know whether he had a booster or not, and we know boosters are recommended.
Joining me now, that State Trooper Robert LeMay. Good morning to you, sir. I cannot imagine what making this decision was like for you.
How long have you been here? You've been here the whole time?
Powell became a household name during the first.
Open tomorrow and Thursday. And the Faulkner Community Hall
was promoted to the rank of general in 1945
by virtue of his.
I know that I should be more diplomatic and say I'm.
And House progressives are not going to vote for it unless they first get a vote.
But he, in a sense, broke ranks to
administration since the dinosaurs walked.
To explain what it was that I was feeling.
And as we saw in tonight's special, you have a spoken word performance, a type of.
His take without any kind of. Just bluntly tell you what he thought, and also.
And they're being accepted, so it creates that inflationary expectation.
Documents. Now, we're going to have a battle in the courts over executive.
The hyperventilating over, Donald Trump.
For the sake of personal freedoms and medical choice. When you look at not just the troopers, but any.
CNN's Kylie Atwood is live at the State Department with more on.
And, it's a very complicated and difficult situation.
But we're also seeing a China that looks at what happened in.
She wears a white coat, but not a face mask. Struts to a Ted Nugent tune, and President Trump retweeted this video, which social media companies later took down, of them promoting unfounded cures like hydroxy.
Fart out a bunch of dumb paintings and be like, buy these, it has nothing to do.
The encouraging thing is watching on a grassroots level people that are.
To be reaching that 80% double dose target and delivering all of the roadmap promises at that point.
Oh, goodness. Well, first off, I would say we do have a real queens of hip hop in the queens tampered with when it comes to a message.
That is not true, Dr. Paul Offit, member of the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee.
It hailed from poetry in the book that we just.
More and more Americans vaccinated and make that available for.
But Dana, on that, the cynical point, Democrats were getting destroyed when it came to.
28% of new cases today were in the southeastern suburbs, including 153 in Casey, which was the highest.
Greater and greater vaccination coverage.
And that's why we're moving. For the next 3 years, the Pentagon was the hub of global military operations. But when the war.
How aggressive the January 6th committee will be as the standoff with Donald Trump's former aide.
In case of the latter video you played, that's Trooper LeMay. He's been on my show for several times over the last several
issue in the South Carolina Senate race, in the Virginia House race.
Maybe the end of a Christmas story where you're like, what day is it? It's Christmas Day.
Everything. Why is it important that stories of pioneering?
So we've passed 1 cage, 2, 3.
The first African American and youngest chairman of the Joint.
Look, the administration and the president are committed to
Bose Avenue Community Hall in Airport.
In just under 10 minutes, if you walk quickly.
Lieutenant General Somerville, who oversaw
That House Speaker Nancy Pelosi may step down.
A political weapon to use against the Republicans by tying it to January 6th.
Who are deeply religious. They have religious convictions against this.
For over 14 years, spent over $14 billion.
Net zero by 2050 is something that...
About the coronavirus.
Asymptomatic spread is not a thing.
And about the vaccines.
All the vaccine candidates have problems.
Is there a way to piece all this together?
Early in the days of the Clinton presidency, convinced the president.
Infamy.
We're here because we feel as though the
And, you know, they're seeing an America that seems to be...
And understand exactly how that played out. He was in the age demographic of the most...
Well, the Chinese are pushing against all of their neighbors. They're pushing Taiwan. They're pushing Japan.
And he said that the evidence was irrefutable that Saddam...
In just 16 months.
I actually talked about that with him whenever I got to see him and speak to him.
The Premier is warning that lockdowns could be imposed in future, but they'll be specific and targeted.
As he has, and we've grappled with them together. It's not easy.
Ethical standards of any administration in history. A number of ethics officials have...
His 2003 speech to the UN in which he presented evidence that...
Commend, though, to everyone who... would it be wise for Americans to do their holiday shopping?
And just rolled up.
There are a lot of steps that we're taking right now to address this in the short term.
I think we need to review the caps that the government has imposed on...
Look, we can't weigh in on this, and then she went ahead and weighed in.
There's also a battle now over executive privilege. The former president is trying to block the...
3.5, which is really about a $5 to $5.5 trillion reconciliation. Democrats are just living in a fantasy world. They deny reality.
Was involved in aiding, so he found something to talk to the Iranians.
And that's going back. Are you talking about the BAM earthquake?
Yeah.
And that was quite a while ago. You know, it's...
But hopefully that's seen for what it is. It is that last... That would create a sense of shame and responsibility.
Is that now infamous address he made to the United Nations?
Those who are vaccinated are very uncommon. Most of the over 700,000 people...
Committee from finding out what he and his allies were doing. The candidate he endorsed after serving in the...
But first this morning, this exclusive, sources tell Sunday Morning Future.
These are the handcuffs for the prisoners. Background.
With the tyranny of medical apartheid nipping at our heels, rise up, rise up, rise up.
And thanks to Somerville, they now each had 5 floors.
Both the text of the treaty and the intention.
Don't feel sorry for it, for God's sake.
It is it's a weakness.
And how is it playing out in the current scenario? Depositions are scheduled this morning for Kash Patel. And
no throwing or assaulting guards, no fighting, no escaping, no damaging the...
View from left to right.
What I know for sure, or the other holidays, what I know is that the
Melburnians braved the elements for one last weekend, living under lockdown.
Again, creates the message that everyone needs to get vaccinated.
That are being deported from the U.S. back to Haiti, and the country simply cannot...
Actually likens herself to Susan B. Anthony.
That's why we're going to go straight to criminal contempt and expect that...
Facing and plaguing my generation. But I will say that although I'm looked upon as a legend or a trailblazer, of course there was Sha hip-hop is headed for female MCs, and why is it important that the legacy, you know, what it is that's being said. I remember I had never...
That's what we understand, and this is just a couple of weeks after we lost General Odierno at the age of 60.
To try and get these vaccination levels as high as we possibly can in every part of the state.
When the 5th floor...
Working from home continues for most, but large construction sites can scale up to 100% capacity.
2 women and 2 men in their 70s. 4 men in their 80s.
No charges. So we'll see if Merrick Garland recognizes that we're in.
To finish up with 90+% of the community vaccinated.
It always sounds good when the federal government is sprinkling around benefits.
Organization, this nonprofit Christian organization based...
To say nothing of the rover that is right now...
I don't know how she looks in the camera and says that and not...
It gave them very short deadlines on purpose. It wanted the documents last week.
Hundreds of thousands contributed. I contributed in a visible way.
Well, the reality is that America needs both of them.
Well, listen, Kate, the State Department has now confirmed that there were 16 Americans who were kidnapped in Haiti.
You know, you own it. You own. By the way, Pottery Barn later came out and said we actually don't have that rule.
Literally minutes after we learned of the death of a man who devoted his life to serving this country.
Even threatening with their own fishermen, you know, looking for.
What's happening also in Haiti is, you know, it's a.
The criminal path is one track. There's also a civil track here. What's that?